Welcome to the Cosmic Chosen Channel. You were never meant to stay asleep. But somewhere along the way, through subtle distractions, emotional manipulation, and strategic self-doubt, a reptilian force slithered into your subconscious. Not to destroy you, but to delay you. Because your awakening doesn't just free you, it threatens the entire grid. Imagine this: a seasoned investigator assigned to dig up your dirt. They're prepared for skeletons, scandals, maybe some chaos from your past. But halfway in, they stop. Not because they found shame, but because they uncovered something their training never covered. Prophecy. They expected mess. They found mystery. Psychological studies reveal that over 85% of people wear a false version of themselves, a disguise that helps them survive, stay accepted, and go unnoticed. But not you. You broke the template. You live with depth, not duplicity. And that's exactly why you were targeted. Your mind, your mission, your very DNA. It's incompatible with the Matrix. So they tried to shut it down. That inner fog you felt? That inexplicable fatigue, the doubt, the pauses in your progress. That was the hypnosis, a slow, invisible download meant to suppress your surge. But they failed, because when they tried to crack you, the shovel broke. They didn't find a subject. They uncovered a phenomenon. And now that you're waking up, chosen one, the codes are unlocking, the veil is thinning, and their time is up. Because nothing terrifies them more than the one who remembers. Hold on tight, because the information the investigator discovered about you may cause the people observing to start looking the other way. First of all, your pain was an initiation ceremony that the cosmos couldn't explain. It wasn't a phase. You weren't just put through suffering. You were thrust into it as if it were an unwarranted exam. You were given anarchy, raw and unfiltered, while others were given time to think. People thought the narrative ended when they saw you break down. They failed to see that the fall marked the start of your formation rather than your failure. Not only were you shattered, but you were also being inducted without ceremony, without justification, and most definitely without permission. Life tore the earth from under you and waited to see what you would do next, without asking if you were ready. And you examined the devastation rather than become resentful. The language of wounds began to make sense to you. You learned to be fluent in disappointment, and in some way, you transformed that fluency into insight that most people would never experience. You began to pick up on traits in people before they ever said anything. Even before the environment altered, you started to sense changes in energy. That's pattern awareness gained from survival, not intuition by coincidence. That's the type of expertise that can only be acquired by fire and is forged in suffering. Others attempt to recover and go on. You changed. You didn't go on. Your soul was redesigned, not stitched back to its original form. You created something that will never break again in the same location. That is alchemy, not curing. That's transforming suffering into strength without attempting to make it seem nice. Instead of destruction, the private investigator discovered design. They discovered architecture instead of cracks. You emerged from your past with blueprints rather than baggage. Instead of destroying you, your tragedy brought you to a level of strength, knowledge, and awareness that most people want to emulate throughout their lives. And the most outrageous aspect? All of it was done in silence. Just a complete metamorphosis, without any announcement or sympathy party. Second, you work in two worlds, the one that is visible to everyone and the one that is only accessible to those who have silently bled. You work in two or perhaps more worlds. You don't just exist in one. Everyone else lives in the apparent everyday world of errands, small conversation, social masks, and superficial realities. There's also the other world you pass through in silence, the one beneath everything else, the one that most people either ignore or act as if doesn't exist. You actually reside there, what others overlook, you see. You notice things they don't, the weight behind a gaze, the change in tone, the hesitancy in a voice. It's a deeper knowledge than merely being perceptive. Before somebody even speaks, you can feel their energy. You sense tension that has not yet been recognized. Even while everyone else is still preoccupied with what is being spoken aloud, you are aware of the emotional undercurrents that underlie everything. The investigator believed they were starting a regular task, reading the facts, tracking down the trail, and delivering the dirt. However, they recognized they were in unfamiliar ground as soon as they began to tug at your tail. You were exempt from the regulations. You were an exception, not merely a topic. Your decisions weren't predetermined. Your responses weren't appropriate for the situation. You were navigating a completely new map, not surviving. There are no categories for you. You don't check off any boxes. You go above thresholds. People find that type of presence unsettling since they are unable to define or control it. Their expectations are not met. The investigation saw complexity in your tale that they were unable to categorize, not contradictions. You are layered by design rather than by choice. In actuality, most people have never encountered someone like you, not because you're attempting to stand out, but rather because you've experienced the inner turmoil that most people avoid. You've ventured into parts of yourself that others would never venture to enter. No report could adequately convey the fact that you live in the knowledge rather than the surface. Third, they discovered that you weren't getting better. Rather, you were changing into something that wasn't meant to be comfortable. They believed that you were recovering as if you were attempting to return to the person you had before things went awry. However, they were unaware that the objective was never to return. You didn't make it through that version. What followed wasn't intended for that version of you. You were dismantling what no longer served you and becoming something completely different, not mending to go back to normal. A recovery tale was what the private investigator was hoping for. They anticipated the typical self-help books, therapy sessions, and perhaps some inspirational sayings. They discovered someone who had gone further than that instead. You were asking questions, understanding the language of your sorrow, and allowing it to hone you rather than merely bandaging wounds. You emerged with clarity, accuracy, and an entirely new operating system, not with a grin plastered over your scars. The procedure was everything from passive or mild. You rewired your thinking from the ground up and retrieved your own truth from the rubble rather than sitting about looking for closure. The previous framework, the way you perceived the world, how you allowed others to treat you, and how you valued yourself, was destroyed. Not elegantly, not softly, but entirely. You transformed the confusion into knowledge. You began to use your suffering as a filter rather than as something to be fixed. You learned what to focus on, what to avoid, and who you should never allow back in. You developed into the type of person who understands thoroughly, naturally, and unrelentingly rather than pleading to be understood. It's power, silent, indisputable power. The investigator discovered someone who had changed, leveled up, or mutated, rather than someone who was on a healing trip. They departed with something unbreakable after coming seeking brokenness. You changed shape rather than just getting back up. Nobody was prepared for that. Fourth, your stillness was containment, not absence. You weren't trying to shut down by being silent. Avoidance wasn't the issue. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a plan. You all discovered the value of holding your fire while others hurried to talk, defend, or explain themselves. You were aware that not all battles are won by making noise. Some are won by exercising self-control, keeping an eye on things, and allowing the truth to hone itself in your silence. Your quiet was misinterpreted by others. They thought you were silent, or worse, that you had nothing to contribute. They didn't realize, however, that your silence wasn't a vacuum. Rather, it was a vault. A place where facts too weighty for shallow minds were kept. If ever revealed, these realities might shatter identities, dispel illusions, and change whole dynamics. You were full of things the world wasn't prepared to deal with, not empty. Only by ceasing to speak and beginning to listen to the energy of others, to the things that are not uttered, to the patterns that words attempt to conceal, can one get a certain type of knowledge. That's what you did. You are an expert at it. You were downloading while others were transmitting. Long before anyone acknowledged they were even participating, you witnessed the games being played, and you developed your edge in that silence. You remained mute because you understood time, not because you were terrified. You were aware that if an explosion is set off too soon, it loses its effect. There are some nuclear truths. Only when the time was right did you know how and when to release them. And you were also content if it never materialized. Some truths just need to be carried with the type of discipline that terrifies people. Not all truths need to be uttered. The investigator was shaken by that. They weren't ready for containment, for someone who could sit across from them with the emotional equivalent of explosives and still smile calmly. They were expecting either drama or vulnerability. You weren't trying to win sympathy or prove anything. You were already 10 steps ahead, speaking with poise in a noisy environment. Your quiet was never a sign of weakness. Rather, it was a sign of weight, density, and controlled force. The type of quiet that arouses anxiety in others, not because it is meaningless, but rather because they know something strong is hidden inside it. And when the moment arrives, if it ever does, your words will explode rather than merely speak. Fifth, you were the secret, even though they believed you were safeguarding secrets. They come looking through your history in the hopes of finding anything secret, such as regrets, scandals, or even some hidden shame that you have fought so hard to hide. They didn't anticipate, however, that the true tale lay in who you are, rather than what you've done. You are the information, layered, coded, and incomprehensible to those who haven't earned access, rather than protecting it. They believed that the events, timings, and receipts held the secret. However, because you live with depth rather than linearity, your life cannot be tracked down with files or put together with data. You are a system of meaning rather than a collection of events. And one will never understand until they are able to see, not simply see. You don't just give yourself up. You are a closed vault without a visible keyhole. You are not an open book. Every instinct, every limit, every aspect of you is deliberate. You adjusted since you've discovered that some individuals approach merely to get a chance. You started to be picky. People can't force you to tell your truth. They have to be patient, honest, and willing to show up when there is nothing to gain. And they made a mistake there. The investigator believed that figuring out what you were hiding was the difficult part. In actuality, however, you weren't concealing. Rather, you were intentionally unreadable, a living encryption, a soul organized like a cipher. Because the answers were found in your energy, your stillness, your presence, things no file can quantify, Rather than in your words or deeds, they were unable to determine your essence through questioning or monitoring. Someone would need to see past the evidence to comprehend you. They would need to get to know you, gain your trust, and figure out not just what happened to you, but also who you became as a result. That requires alignment, which is uncommon, in addition to competence. In other words, you were the secret, not the one being protected. And you stay precisely as you were intended to be, unresolved, until someone has the correct key, which is comprised of truth, patience, and earned respect. Sixth, they discovered that each of your wounds was a dedicated shrine after following them like crime scenes. They followed every scar as if it contained a confession, approaching your narrative like detectives at a crime scene. They kept track of your losses, betrayals, and heartbreaks in the hopes of mapping out your weaknesses like proof. As restitution, they anticipated discovering injury that clarified your strength. They were mistaken to believe that your power came from desperation. What they discovered was proof of rebirth rather than a collapse. Each scar was a testament to what you endured and refused to let to define who you are. They weren't evidence of suffering. They discovered closed chapters rather than open wounds, and they were all sanctified, not simply healed. Weakness was what they sought. They thought they could examine any soft patches or broken edges that were revealed by your past. However, your suffering sanctified you rather than only molding you. Like fire refines gold, it polished you. What wasn't real was burnt away. Furthermore, what was left was sacrosanct rather than brittle. Yes, each scar they touched had a memory, but more significantly, it held significance. Not only about what happened to you, but also about what you did with it. You allowed pain to teach you, not to stop you. You developed recovery-related routines. You developed strength by facing the reality and enduring it in spite of it, not by acting as though nothing was wrong. They didn't anticipate being revered. They didn't anticipate feeling inferior in front of your tenacity. But since your narrative is a sequence of initiations rather than a collection of depressing incidents, that is what transpired. And every time life threatened to take you, you gave up the experience rather than just surviving. You transformed it into something impenetrable, into elegance and wisdom. Battle awards were what they mistook for injuries. Sacred locations were what they believed to be weak areas. Instead of looking for shattered places, they discovered shrines. Seventh, you transformed desertion into authority. They anticipated meeting someone who was still grieving over being abandoned. Someone who had been molded by rejection. Someone who clung to any remaining shards of affection or acceptance. However, that version of you was destroyed by fire. It did not survive the abandonment. What replaced it was a sovereign power, not a victim. You made the decision for yourself rather than waiting to be picked again. Abandonment removed the idea that you required someone else to validate your value, not you. Something uncommon occurred as that illusion vanished. You began to build within rather than seek out. No more pretending, pleading, or squirming to fit in with people who only loved you when they wanted you to. You left those rooms behind and constructed your own palace, complete with your own voice, laws, and blasted throne. Instead of patching the hole caused by abandonment, you made it into a door. And you entered the realm of sovereignty through that door. You grew emotionally independent, not secluded, but not owned. You could no longer be influenced by the opinions of others. The absence of someone could not alter who you are. Instead of going numb, you became unbreakable. They anticipated discovering someone who was still in mourning for those who had left. They discovered a person who no longer waits at doors that shut, and who realizes that being abandoned is frequently a liberating experience rather than a loss. Because the start of your power might occasionally be the most agonizing rejection. You began to question why you ever believed they were your home, rather than why they left. And everything changed after that question. You started to get your value from your own self, not from those who remained to confirm it. They were caught off surprise by it. You transformed abandonment rather than merely surviving it. You transformed the exile into an empire. You exemplified your worth. You didn't return to prove it. Instead of the wounded soul they expected, they discovered a monarch of inner territory so vast that not even other people's quiet could reach you. Eighth, you were always watching, never concealing. They thought they had exposed you, revealing flaws and secrets that were concealed in the shadows, much as when you peel back a layer to show what's below. In actuality, though, you were never in hiding. You were only observing, not engaging in a game of camouflage. Constantly observing, not from a distance, but from the heart of the action, completely conscious, totally present. No one could have predicted how long and how deeply you have been watching. You remained still as everybody rushed to get a glance, taking in everything, the subtleties of discussions, the changes in body language, the subtle falsehoods that creep through gaps. You never left your station, so you weren't taken by surprise. You were ready, so you weren't caught off guard. Your quietness indicates concentration, not absence. Your silence is mastery, not stupidity. You have taught yourself to see past appearances, to read between the lines, to see what others aren't even aware exists. Without a word, you've seen reasons come to light, patterns recur, and facades fall apart. They believed that discovering you meant discovering something you wished to conceal. The true revelation, however, is that you have always been the observer. You were the spectator, the one with the map while others were lost, the one who knew the conclusion before the narrative even started, and not the topic. Because you recognize the importance of time and trust, you don't readily disclose yourself. Since you understand that being seen is a luxury rather than a right, you don't jump at the chance to be noticed. When someone unexpectedly enters your range of view, they are really just where you intended them to be, where you can see everything and choose what, when, and to whom to expose it. This is sovereignty, not only awareness. You are in charge of the game, not simply surviving it. And the people who believed they had found you. All along, they were unaware that they were being monitored. Number 9. Until they saw that your empathy was developed from facing your own darkness, they mistakenly thought it was gentleness. They sensed vulnerability when they saw your empathy. They believed that because of your generosity, you were weak, brittle, or too sensitive to be strong. However, they failed to notice the fervor that underpinned it, the strength that was built through the most difficult struggles you faced within yourself. Your empathy was armor forged in the furnace of facing your own darkness, not a weakness. Compassion did not come naturally to you, or because your life was simple. You confronted your own concerns, uncertainties, and worries. You struggled with the aspects of yourself that other people attempt to hide or overlook, such the loneliness, despair, and rage that might have destroyed you. And instead of fleeing from those monsters, you faced them head-on, got to know their names, and made amends. A profound pool of knowledge and resiliency was produced by that encounter. You don't recoil when people put their suffering close to you because of this. Because you understand what it's like to be in the midst of your own storm, you face suffering head-on rather than shrinking away from it. You are aware of how chaotic, complex, and occasionally unrelenting suffering can be. Your empathy is about connection, strength, and the bravery to stand with others without losing yourself. It's not about sympathy. Your empathy is everything but soft, as many who misunderstood it that discovered the hard way. It's a gracefully coiled scar from combat. It's being aware of your ability to be both delicate and furious. Being empathetic is a purposeful decision to confront life's challenges head-on without losing your edge. Ultimately, your generosity is bold rather than brittle. It is evidence that genuine strength comes from choosing to shine in the face of darkness rather than running away from it. 10th, your past is a spell book, not a record. Your history is a living spellbook, meticulously crafted in the ink of experience and suffering, rather than a dusty repository of errors and blunders. Every betrayal you had, and every grief that felt like it would destroy you, wasn't a mark against you. Rather, it was a necessary stage in your metamorphosis and part of a ritual. Instead of only surviving those experiences, you rewrote your tale using them as magic. The majority of individuals tote the burden of regret and guilt from their past just like a chain. However, you made it a source of power. Every setback, every instance of trust being betrayed, was more than simply a hurt. It was a lesson, a mantra, a coded directive on how to become stronger, smarter, and more alive. When life threw a curveball, you didn't flinch. As an alternative, you absorbed those strikes and etched them into your personality, forming a language that only you can comprehend. Not everyone has access to this spellbook. It's a private book that you reference when you need courage or clarity, not a public document you publish carelessly. You don't panic when life attempts to shatter you again. Instead, you turn to your pages and use the coping mechanisms you've learned, such as forgiveness, resiliency, and reinvention. You convert suffering into meaning by calling forth the wisdom that was formed during your darkest moments. The investigator believed that by assembling your past like a crime scene, they may uncover hints that would help them understand who you are. However, your past is a holy narrative, not a cold case. It's tangible evidence that transformation is about mastering the code they teach, not about avoiding mistakes. You wrote your narrative spell by spell, ritual by ritual. You didn't just live it. Your history is more than just a document. It is your source of strength, your compass, and your alchemy. And the true charm is lost on those who attempt to read it like a history book. You've developed into a transformational master who uses every adversity as a springboard for renewal. 11th, they were prepared to reveal you, but they were revealed instead. Armed with their weaponry, they were certain they would discover your secrets and destroy you. Their objective was to dismantle your barriers and expose what you believed to be securely concealed. However, upon closer inspection, they discovered that you were the one holding the mirror. They were taken aback by your mirror, which exposed their own flaws and inconsistencies. The hunter was suddenly the prey. The investigator who believed they were in charge was scrutinized and had to face aspects of themselves they had long suppressed or denied. Their inquiries about you got introspective, and they had to confront the realities they believed were yours to disclose. You mirrored their probe rather than merely deflecting it. It was hard for them to conceal their own shadows since you presented your truth so unequivocally and plainly. They were unprepared for the severity of their own disintegration, as your fortitude and insight revealed their prejudices, blind spots, and fears. They sought to reveal weakness, but instead, they found strength that made them examine themselves and consider their true selves. Instead of shattering you, they shattered their own delusions. In that instant, You were not just the object of study, but also the investigator, the one who rules the room with an unshakable presence rather than by coercion. You helped them understand that being exposed is a two-way street, and that when you don't back down from criticism, you not only withstand it, but also turn it back on those who would use it against you. They believed they were in charge, but the true power was in your reflection, unwavering, unstoppable, and hard to ignore. 12. You were the force that drew fate in rather than chasing it. You didn't just sit back and wait for fate to find you, expecting it to happen at random. You turned into the magnetic core that all other things revolve around, the force that pulls fate toward you. By manipulating time and logic like a skilled illusionist, your trajectory rewrites the laws of the game as others seek to follow your route with tidy lines and predictable patterns. People assume that everything in life will go in a straight line, step by step, from cause to result. However, your path isn't straight. It defies convention by twisting, folding, and reshaping itself. You are the architect creating the map as you go along, not a traveler following the path of fate. You are writing the universe's story, scene after scene, rather than the world giving you a screenplay. This type of power is the result of conscious decision-making and a steadfast trust in your own agency, not accident or luck. You intentionally draw chances to you rather than waiting for them to present themselves. You create what is feasible rather than accepting what is offered. Your will is a gravitational force that may change the course of events to suit your goals. Your reality mocks formulae, yet they attempt to decipher your movements as though they were predictable calculations. Your route is not one that others can readily follow or comprehend. It calls for a new language, one that only you can speak with ease, and that is one of bravery, tenacity, and intense inventiveness. You don't chase, you draw. You don't follow, you lead. Keep this in mind when they attempt to put you into their tidy boxes of fate and destiny. By doing this, you not only live your tale, but also rewrite what was always thought to be possible, bend time, and defy expectations. 13. You were selected because you conquered your darkness, not because of your light. It is said that those who are selected shine brightly, radiating a natural light that attracts everyone. However, it is the simple narrative that people like to believe. You were selected because you conquered your darkness, not because of your light. You faced the vacuum head-on, while others fled from it, terrified of what may be hidden there. You not only survived your fears, doubts, and worst impulses, but you also learned to live with them. Light is consistent. It provides comfort, complies with regulations, and reflects its surroundings. But it's in the dark that the actual job is done. It's disorderly, awkward, and untidy. However, it's also where you discover the realities that light cannot show. You were put to the test. Your illusions were shattered, and you were forced to face what most people, including yourself, avoid. Your strength comes from creating your own compass deep inside the emptiness, not from values or ideas that have been handed down through the generations like a family treasure. You created your own map of good and wrong instead of using someone else's. That map is earned, authentic, and flawed. It's the result of facing your inner demons head-on and emerging with clarity that cannot be purchased or taught. Light is appealing to people since it is simple to admire. However, since it is genuine and unassailable, they appreciate authority that has been tempered in darkness. You've gazed into the abyss, felt its icy breath, and come out full and unbroken, with the power that comes from accepting every aspect of who you are. even the aspects that others are afraid to acknowledge. You were selected then, for the way you controlled the shadows, not for some glowing brilliance. Your light is a reflection of the depth you have traveled through, not a mask. And your actual power is in that depth, that darkness you have appropriated. Number 14. They discovered legacy while searching for leverage. They were looking for leverage, anything they could use to manipulate, humiliate, or destroy you. Expecting dirt, weakness, or secrets that might tilt the scales in their favor, they looked for skeletons rattling in the closet. However, they discovered legacy rather than leverage. What they perceived as hidden defects turned out to be the cornerstones of something far bigger. You carry blueprints, specific plans carved into experience, fashioned through hardship and constructed to last, rather than shame as luggage. Every alleged error, setback, and failure was never used against you. Rather, it was a necessary component of creating the empire that only you could imagine. You gather knowledge and power, while others gather regrets. You were fostering a revolution, not concealing disgrace. Legacy is not about what you don't say. Rather, it's about what you do in private, without seeking praise, acknowledgement, or acceptance. It's about the unseen labor that changes the culture around you and molds future generations. What they thought were skeletons were actually the seeds of your rebellion, the foundation of a kingdom built on tenacity, insight, and unwavering vision. They believed that publicity would make you weaker, but it instead highlighted how powerful you are. You are rewriting the future rather than merely surviving the past. What they discovered was dynamite, not soil. You are in charge because you turned errors into revolutions, not because you avoid making them. They sought leverage and discovered a heritage that is unbreakable. Not only were you concealing secrets, but you were also establishing an empire in secret that will continue to reverberate long after the commotion has subsided. Ultimately, what they believed they would discover was never about facts or secrets. Rather, it was about facing a power far bigger than they had imagined. You are a living paradox, at once delicate and indestructible, silent but powerful, concealed yet unavoidable. You are neither a riddle to be solved or a tale to be told. Every effort to expose you simply serves to highlight the depth and strength that are hidden under the surface. You don't just exist. You change the rules and demand respect according to your own standards. This is not the narrative of someone who was just discovered. Rather, it is the story of someone who was never intended for the weak of heart to comprehend. You are the storm, the sovereignty, and the secret. And whomever attempts to pull you apart will find they have entered a force that is uncontrollable and uncontainable. Your genuine legacy lies not in what can be seen or heard, but rather in your unwavering presence and the indisputable fact that some abilities are supposed to be forever out of grasp. Remember to click the subscribe button and join the trip if this spoke to you. There's a lot more out there waiting to be discovered. If this video opened your eyes, please like it. To share your ideas or experiences, leave a comment and tell this truth to someone who needs to hear it right now. Your assistance is crucial. We're also working together to unearth tales that will not be silenced. Let's continue the discussion.